Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Devil Source Postgame Show for the first time this year from Desert Financial Arena. I'm your host, Blake Neiman, here with Chris Cartman, following Arizona State's 55-48 win over Idaho State to open the season for the Sun Devils. And Chris, it wasn't pretty, to say the least, for Arizona State. Bobby Hurley having that wake-up call, so he said, against Duke, but it didn't seem to translate here to Tempe tonight.
They had a good stretch in the first half after they got down 11-3. They had a 18-3 run, 15-0 run. They played better defense in that stretch, more intensity, physicality, but for some reason they were very lethargic to start the second half. Were outplayed, I think, really for much of the second half. Idaho State had 16 offensive rebounds. That's a crazy high number. I think people who watch the game or may see some highlights will see Jaden Quainance really struggled on the offensive end, missed a couple of three-pointers right out of the gate, picked up 2 fouls in the first 2 minutes, sat on the floor, never got into any rhythm. Josan Sanin had double figures, made some quality shots. BJ Freeman, Alston Mason, I think those guys were sort of the anchors of this team. Sean Phillips, coming off the bench tonight, had some good minutes. But, man, ASU has got to get a lot better in a hurry because this was one of the 2 worst teams that they'll probably play this season. And it was a 1-point game with like 5 or 6 minutes left.
And we know with ASU moving into this new league, the Big 12, it's going to be a gauntlet conference, and rebounding is going to be especially key. You mentioned the 16 offensive rebounds for Idaho State. Bobby Hurley said, if we're allowing that against a team like that, we're going to allow 1 million against other teams.
Look, they lost by 56 or whatever to Duke in the exhibition game. Hurley said, we got our ass kicked, and he also said it was a wake-up call. But it's almost like his players slept through the alarm, I think, a little bit tonight because they're going to have to summon a lot more intensity and physicality that's going to have to be consistent throughout games, 40 minutes of games, because these opponents are going to be so much more difficult than anything that they saw tonight. Maybe this is the type of team that will play to some opponents once they get into the heart of their schedule, but you can't have an on-off switch and expect that that's going to work. You can't give up 16 offensive rebounds. That's mostly, of anything in basketball, Blake, boxing out and not giving up offensive rebounds is mostly effort. It's just you want it more than your opponent, and I felt like ASU played this game as though it knew that it was a superior athletic team, a better caliber of player, and therefore it didn't need to really exert the type of intensity that would have allowed it to have a quality performance, and that is an unacceptable thing after what happened against Duke in the exhibition and with the games that they have immediately coming up on their schedule.
Alston Mason post-game led all scorers with 14 tonight for ASU, along with BJ Freeman. They talked about 2 of the key issues for this team right now is they don't feel like they're coming together as a team. What did you see from them from a talent standpoint, and maybe if that comes together, what they can become?
They're both seniors, transferred in, were big-time players at mid-major schools. I think that there's right now a leadership void that is very present on this team, and both of them vocalize that they need to step up and be better in that regard. Something that I thought that was sort of eye-opening was Freeman said that you got 5-star freshmen and they kind of maybe need to figure out some things on their own because they have a certain belief in themselves that it's hard to as a leader to try to sort of impart into them, and that's, I think, going to have to change because Quainance looked lost for a lot of this game on the offensive end of the floor. Amir Ali came in chucking some threes, hit a 3. I mean, he's a guy who's known for being able to make some perimeter shots, but that trio of freshmen, as heavily as ASU is probably going to need to rely on them this season, they're not ready yet, and they're going to have to start with having a more consistent overall approach to what they're doing. Now, Quainance did have 9 blocks, and he was very, in the second half, I think, very important player at altering shots, being an anchor in the paint. That's a positive thing that you can build off of. But look, between him and Bashir Jihad, they were 0 of 13 from the floor against a team that is as easy as they're probably going to get paint points. They did have 24 fast break points. They got into some transition. That kind of worked better for them in the second half. In the first half, they shot the ball reasonably well from the perimeter between Alston, Mason, and Sannon. So that's something that maybe they can build off of. Hurley said that he thought coming into the season that they'd be a little bit better shooting the ball and on offense than on defense. And we're starting to get a better idea of what this team looks like, and it has to get a lot better in a hurry.
Bobby Hurley had kind of a full circle moment when he came back to Duke, and after 31 years since he last went there on the floor as a coach and coaching in his first game there. Now his career at ASU kind of comes back to him in a way, as he's going to be taking on Santa Clara this Friday in Las Vegas, where he's going to face off against the coach who had the job here before him. And now Bobby Hurley going on 10 years. Herb Sendek will be the coach there. What are your thoughts on kind of that reunion of sorts?
It's a fascinating thing. Sendek spent, the better part of a decade before Hurley, now in his 10th season. I've covered those guys for, the majority of my career has been those two basketball coaches. Rob Evans, a few years before that. Sendek's done a good job at Santa Clara. It's a conference where you have these two elite teams that have, historically been dominant. Gonzaga and St. Mary's. Santa Clara has been the third team, or kind of in that conversation for the third team. They've had several NBA draft picks and first rounders, actually more first rounders than Hurley's had at ASU. Sendek is a good coach. It's interesting because he struggled to recruit as effectively as he needed to as his tenure unfolded at ASU. He's a good basketball coach, and Hurley's been able to recruit, but he hasn't been able to get the execution from his players at a consistently high enough level. I think that ASU fans are going to look at this matchup, and it's a very difficult, precarious situation for Hurley, because ASU will be expected to beat Santa Clara playing in a smaller conference, and yet this looks to me on paper like it's probably a toss-up type of a game. A loss for Hurley in his 10th season would be an ominous thing in terms of how he's perceived, losing to the guy that you replaced who's at a lower conference than you. So they have to avoid that if you're Bobby Hurley.
It's going to be quite the peculiar situation we'll see in Las Vegas on Friday. Thanks for tuning in tonight to the Devil Source Postgame Show. That's Chris Cartman. I'm Blake Neiman signing off from Desert Financial Arena.